Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to introduce today to you our resource person, Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt, who has joined us for this advanced lecture series organized by Department of English along with IQAC and PRC, Nowgong College Autonomous. Before we begin, I request our coordinator of IQAC Nowgong College to briefly give a welcome note.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Sabrin. Very good afternoon to everyone. Respected HOD Department of English, faculty members, and our today's resource person, faculty members, and members of Primary Research Committee, and all participants. It is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to our advanced lecture series organized by Department of English in association with Internal Quality Assurance Cells, Nowgong College Autonomous, and Primary Research Committee of Nowgong College Autonomous. Actually, I'm truly honored that our resource person, Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt, Associate Professor, Department of English, University of Kashmir, here with us today. He will enlighten us very relevant and interesting topic, Marxism and contemporary theory. On behalf of Nowgong College Autonomous Fraternity, I welcome you, sir. And also, we express our heartfelt thanks and gratitude for your valuable time. We are, sir, actually eagerly waiting for your very thought-provoking deliberation. Once again, I welcome you and to our advanced lecture series. I hope our participants will benefit it for your deliberation from your deliberation. And once again, I welcome you to Nowgong College family and over to Dr. Sabrin. Yeah, thank you.
Uh, Before we begin, I would like to introduce today's audience to our enlightened resource person. Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt is an academic, writer, translator, and cultural critic. He teaches at the postgraduate department of English, South Campus, University of Kashmir. He has completed his PhD from the Department of English, Ohio University, USA. He has done his MPhil and MA programs from the Center for English Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is the author of 7 books, including Desolation Called Peace, HarperCollins, and Rupture, Oxford University Press. This is a recent publication by Javed Iqbal Bhatt. He is a weekly columnist for the Greater Kashmir and Daily Times, published from Kashmir and Lahore, respectively, and is associated with Doordarshan and Radio Kashmir. Javed Iqbal Bhatt teaches literary theory and criticism, British fiction, Indian English writing across genres, and modern British poetry. So over to you, Javed.
Thank you, Dr. Sabreen, and First of all, I want to just check if my screen is visible and my voice is audible, and I am also there. My is it visible everything?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's visible.
So this PPT first slide is visible there before I start.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, all right. So first of all, good afternoon to all of you, and I feel very privileged to have been invited for this presentation before all of you, before your esteemed team and all the research scholars who are present out there. And this is also a good way to reconnect after a long time through this presentation. Is my voice okay? Absolutely no problem in that. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Okay. I think I should go ahead then with my presentation. First of all, some basic information about this talk, what I will be doing and how I will be doing all this. As you know that my talk has been titled Karl Marx and Contemporary Theory. I have not made way too many slides. There are some 23 slides that I have made, and the time allotted to me is 2 hours with a break of 10 minutes in between. So what I will be doing is I will be talking about first 11 or 12 slides in the first hour, and then in the next hour after the break, we will be talking about the rest of the slides. And then if there is any question or answer, I don't know whether the format allows space for that at the end. But if it doesn't, I'm open to questions if we get
There'll
some
be
time.
a interaction. Yes.
Okay, so what is the time for that, if I may know?
It's up to you. I mean, how much you take.
Okay, okay,
We can keep it brief.
okay, good. Okay, thank you for that. So that is the format that I am proceeding ahead with, and hopefully I'll be able to meet the expectations of this title and this topic. Now, first of all, to begin with, my topic, as I have already informed here, is Karl Marx and contemporary theory. And the full name of this man, Karl Marx, we often know Karl Marx, but it is Karl Heinrich Marx, who was born in 1818, 1883. Now, conventionally, I should have put a picture of Karl Marx here, but I tried to find a good looking pic of his. I could not, so I thought it is better, to keep it out there on the net. All those pictures that you already are used to seeing, like long beard, tousled hair, and all that. So that is 19th century, a very momentous century in the history of in European history, uh, as well as British history, a very momentous century that was in terms of industrial revolution and some other events that I will subsequently talk about. Then we have his journey. If you look at his overall journey of Karl Marx, it begins from Trier, a place in Germany, very kind of a calm place by a riverside where Karl Marx lived. And then he ended up at Highgate Cemetery. But if you look at his family, it was a Jewish family. But his father was of a liberal temperament, and he later on also baptized a Protestant variety of Christianity. From his grandfather was a rabbi who was Jewish. But then his father, being of a liberal temperament, a man of enlightenment, he switched over to this to protect the change. But why it happened? Maybe there were certain changes. In fact, if you remember, it is said that one of the greatest writings, one of the most popular writings, not greatest, one of the most popular writings of 19th century was Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. Now, it's a very the element of anti-Jewishness is very prominent in that play. So maybe it is because of the wave of anti-Semitism that was prevalent at that time, which compelled him to move in that direction, or simply he was of a liberal temperament. It did not matter to him to which faith he adhered to, and he thought Protestant variety is of a uh, more broad-based and more inclusive perhaps than the other variety, so he changed over to that. But all along his life, you find that Karl Marx was a kind of a rebel from the moment he took from one place, from Trier to Bonn to Berlin. He ended up in Paris. Then for some time, he was in Belgium as well as in London. Ultimately, he ended up in the historic city of London. So what you find in him from beginning onward, so you can already foresee the kind of shape that his ideas would take from the journey that he took from one city to another city. In fact, from some places he was even expelled. Initially, his father was not quite happy with the way his studies were going, and he shifted him from Bonn to Berlin to another university so that he could study more seriously from the party school that he was earlier. But it reflects a little bit on his entire personality, which later on we will find out how his ideas also keep on changing and how there is a rebellious trait in him. And ultimately, he is buried at Highgate Cemetery. Highgate Cemetery is a very prominent place, a natural reserve now in England, where some of the prominent dissidents are buried, like Mary Ann Evans, George Eliot's pen name. She is also buried, and she had also that rebellious strain in her character. In that, at a time when uh, at a time of conservative Victorian England, you have you know uh, writing certain things or doing certain things in your personal life which were not quite acceptable, and George Eliot did that in her time. So that is reflected also in her very famous novel Middlemarch. A description of that will come later on also. How she chose to adopt a path that was not quite acceptable in 19th century England. So she is also buried in the same cemetery. Now, it is famously said when Karl Marx was asked that, you brought all this, you came from Germany, so why did you not choose Germany as the place where revolution can happen? And like a typical rationalist, he replies that, if you want to bring about a revolution in Germany, it is almost impossible because the people are so methodical that even if you ask them to go and burn a train station, they will first of all queue up. They are so methodical people. So ultimately, he ends up in the Highgate Cemetery, and in his background, we find these two predominant strains of thought. One is his law and then philosophy. Although he combined other dimensions also out there, but these were two. Law, he was by training. In fact, his father was also a lawyer, a very popular and very successful lawyer of his time. And then he brought in the philosophical insights as he went to some schools out there. Bruno Bauer was one of his teachers, and Bruno Bauer himself was influenced by Hegel. So he joined these radical socialists who were already out there. When Karl Marx was growing up, they were already around in campuses and newspapers. You could read articles about these people. So he came under the influence of these guys, especially later on Hegel. Bruno Bauer was his very charismatic teacher. at university, and then finally Hegel comes into picture, a very influential person in the life of Karl Marx. His ideas he modified, he adapted to new situations. We'll talk about that also in detail. Then we have I'm changing these slides. The system seems to be a little low, and hopefully, are my slides visible to you out there?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So we move on then from this idea of Marxism, what Marxism is. In fact, quite surprisingly, there are books written by people. For example, David McLellan, who talks about Marxism before Marxism, and then the Marxist thought and the Marxism after Marxism. It is a three-volume book that he has written, wherein he talks about this Marxism. But the interesting point is that Marxism is not something that was entirely new. There was a Marxist, Marxist ideas that were afloat around the time, even before Marx was perhaps born. So, for example, if you look at Plato's Republic, in that also he talks about republic, the communism of violence. Or in other thinkers later on, for example, Robert Owen, Proudhon, and many other people who had talked about, although not exactly the same ideas as Karl Marx enunciated, but somewhat similar. They also thought on the similar lines, if not the same, if not on the same page as Karl Marx, because he did provide some new ideas also as he began to write. His life is full of writings. In fact, it is said that when he was in London, he would be in the library from 8 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. At night, studying constantly, which is a little bit in contrast with what he proposed. So he himself lived a life of ideas, but he wanted actually a life of activity. So which in a way undercuts some of his propositions that praxis or practical activity is important, although his own life was so submerged under books, under ideas. He was constantly working upon refining his ideas throughout. So Marxism is also one query, and it also presents a way of looking. And there have been several variants of Marxism that we have known, that we have also maybe seen, and we are also witness to some of the variants, some of the strains of Marxism available today around the world. So you can see, in fact, some people have divided Marxism into classical Marxism. You have Frankfurt School, Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse. Then you have, after World War II, Marxism, wherein, for example, Althusser comes into picture, and how Althusser then modified this idea of Marxism. And then some prominent thinkers who came around World War II, who gave a definite shape, especially Frankfurt School, because if you look at Frankfurt School, 1930s, you have these three prominent people, although there were others also like Lowenthal, but chiefly Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse, who were mostly Jewish, and they wrote around the time when the Nazis were on the rise, and later on they were eclipsed by the Nazi movement when National Socialism came into picture. So their ideas, they tried now to modify some of the things that classical Marxism was talking about. For example, the labor theory or class, they tried to displace that and believe that we need to incorporate more cultural elements. For example, some of them were interested in music, others were interested in arts, different kinds of arts. So incorporating all of them was their chief drive, not only focusing on class struggle or revolution or proletariat. So they tried to bring Marxism up to date. But later on, we find that Frankfurt School also kind of phase, it went away because when Nazis became not maybe popular and as wanted to take revenge because of World War I and those treaties that were signed later on. These people eclipsed. Horkheimer was dismissed, terminated from service in the university, and most of them went into different parts as exiles. So that also petered away. But that was a kind of Marxist influential school. Then you have the new left. Marcuse is considered the father of the new left. Again, they brought in, they tried to now collaborate with different ideas that were prevalent, for example, feminism, gay rights, lesbian rights, environmental protection. All of them they brought in. So we are seeing that although the broader framework is that of Marxism, we are witnessing that these different schools, these different people who came on subsequent occasions, they tried to modify and adapt Marxism to their own needs. Although the substratum was the same, that is Marxism, his ideas, but then they were uh, qualified, they were tempered in order to fit in with the new occasion. For example, these we also witnessed World War before, where all of them are different kinds of movements from different areas are brought together. So so but ultimately we find that Marx, Freud, Darwin, he sometimes put in league with, say, Darwin. In fact, yeah, the interesting bit is that when he wrote Das Kapital 1867, 67, he wanted to dedicate it to Charles Darwin because he thought, as Charles Darwin provided an theory of evolution, providing the social evolution theory, how societies have evolved and how they have reached to this stage. But then he did not, but he did want to dedicate, and he called his idea scientific socialism, that I'm using this scientific method, facts, and inductive reasoning from bottom up, how it has all happened. Although when he was providing stages of history, which we will look into, he found some gaps and he had to stop for a long time to find out how I can fill these gaps, because these gaps were too astounding for him, for his framework, that he could not find the appropriate ideas to be inserted out there. But ultimately, he did succeed. And in fact, whether one believes in Marxism or not, there is a it looks like a very rational framework, that ideas are connected and there is connection. That is why it has an appeal. Whether it is it is practical, if we take Karl Marx's ideas with its logical conclusion, is another thing. But as a structure, as a form, it does appeal. In fact, one of my teachers used to joke that if you are not a Marxist in your youth, there is something wrong in your heart. And if you are a Marxist in your mature age, when you are an elder, there is something wrong in your head. So it does appeal to the youth. It has that attraction in its construction as well as in its long-term goals, what it wants to do for society. So we have different, and then there are social democrats and communists. In India also we have extreme communist, Marxist, Leninist, different varieties, social democrats who believe that the way forward is democratic method, using the parliamentary democracy can as a method. But what is theory? First of all, if we say that Marxism is a theory, what is, if you look at the etymological origin, it comes from theoria, which means contemplation or reflection, and that suits with what we do with theories now, how we understand theories now, is that we have, after contemplation, after reflection, we get to produce a new outlook. A theory is a system of thought, a worldview, an outlook. It is like, for example, you are out in the landscape and you have different pairs of glasses. You have blue, you have maybe black, or you have a purple or a pink, and you put on one and you see a pink, scenery, and then you put on another, you see of another color. It is the same way with theories. So theories are these systems of thought that invite you to look at the world from a particular perspective. They provide you a perspective. And then we look at, when we do criticism in text, criticism in class, we look at texts from different perspectives, and uh, most of them seem to be English. And then uh, some believe in one and take that belief to an extreme extent. But Marxism is, in a way, different from most of these theories, because here we have uh, something different, because Marx was proposing activity. Now, if you look at these different types, so you have, some of you may have already known about it, because uh, I assume, not assume, I think I have already been informed that there are research scholars and postgraduate students also. They may have a uh, beginning information about who he is and how he is provide us a view, a different view, different theories providing different views, particular text or a particular the world as a whole, how to look at the world. So we have text-based theories like new criticism, archetypal. We have text-based theories where you only, I. Richards, and we have famous book Practical Criticism, where you look at the text and not go outside the text. Again, a very attractive theory, because uh, they did some experiments with university students. They gave them some poems, and then without the author, and they asked them evaluate the poem, and when they evaluated the poem, they gave bad judgments, or they summarily rejected the poems. Later on, when he came back into the classroom, told them that this poem is by Shakespeare, this is by Milton, and suddenly there was a change of opinion. They just wanted to show that how, there is an anxiety of influence. To quote Harold Bloom, that when you know the author, that judges, that influences your judgment of a particular text, so it is better to remove all those things. Then we have author based, biographical, psychological, where you, and this is often done by students in the Indian context. You have a poem and you often look at it from the perspective of the author, what author had done in his life, where he had gone, what texts he had read, and then we evaluate the poems according to the same information that we did, or psychological. Then we have society context based theories, in which we put different kinds of, we have hermeneutics, we have feminism, moral didactic, Freudian, psychoanalytical, and Marxist, which is our focus. That comes in the society context. That you cannot read Marxism without, first of all, also bringing the context into picture, because context, uh, it is, in fact, Antonio Gramsci, when he talked about Marxism, he said Marxism is a philosophy of praxis. It is praxis. So there is a practical activity. It is not something which is just in the realm of the mind. There is a famous book by Ejaz Ahmed called In Theory, Classes, Nations, and Literatures. And I had the privilege of writing on that book, and one of my papers is published with Third Text, London, and it's a very comprehensive paper that I have written on that. In that, he says that since the 1960s, there has been a proliferation of theories. So many theories have come up. But what distinguishes them from Marxist, he himself adheres to the Marxist thought, is that while the other theories seem to be like a conversation between intellectuals. So one writes an essay, an intellectual writes an essay, the other intellectuals read it. Common people do not seem to have any connection with that, which is true also if you look at the language that is being used to write, language used in theoretical context. In fact, there is a statement in a lighter vein made by someone, I don't remember the name. He says that in the first world academies, if first world is the correct phrase to use here, the developed world academies, the your salary is directly proportional to the level of incomprehension achieved. The more incomprehensive you are, the higher your salary is. So that is in a lighter vein. And the other thing that comes to mind is that it seems like as if there is a crisis of language. There is perhaps nothing new to say. So you carry on with this obscure, abstract, esoteric kind of language deployed in order to write. So anyway, Ajaz Ahmed says that since 1960s, we have had this proliferation of theories, different kinds of theories. But most of them seem to be like a conversation between intellectuals themselves. Hardly any connect between intellectuals and society, intellectuals and common people. Or maybe it is like Frederick Jameson writes an essay, Ejaz Ahmed responds back, and then Frederick Jameson writes back. So the other people do not seem to be in touch with what they are talking about, because one, the language is so formidable. It just takes a couple of pages to open Homi Bhabha's books to find out what I am talking about. So anyway, we put Marxism in society context-based theory because without context, without societal context, Marxism, Marxism has no support. It just remains then in the air. But that is precisely what Karl Marx was trying to avoid. That you cannot simply ignore context, the societal condition, because unlike previous some previous scholars, it is society that shapes consciousness. The material reality shapes your consciousness, and it is not the other way around. It is not some deity sitting out there that has done something to you, and that comes first, and then the objective reality comes later on. What he was propounding and propounding very forcefully is that the material comes first, the matter comes first, because then that shapes your through your sense organs, your mind is shaped. So it is a that tabula rasa which on which impressions are created by the surroundings. Then we have reader based, so that searches meaning through reader, what kind of impact it has on the reader. So these are different kinds of theories, and how I have put them in one way of classifying them, and Marxism fits in a society context based theory, because as Marx himself says, it is not the consciousness of men which determines their existence. It is on the contrary their social existence which determines their consciousness. So some previous, in fact, as Bible opens up, it says in the beginning was the word. So there was already out there before the objective reality, and then this reality was created. So that is why Antonio Gramsci has termed it as philosophia praxis, that there is a practical dimension to this philosophy, and without thinking about practicality, without actually trying to implement it, Marxism is nothing. In fact, Gramsci, then when he was imprisoned and he wrote those prison diaries, he also gave some other contribution to Marxism by adding some new things. For example, hegemony as one of the concepts that he has developed as a Marxist thinker. So moving forward, then we have what was then new when Karl Marx came in 19th century. So we have some terms that are often talked about, and one of them is dialectics. Then we have dialectical materialism, we have historical materialism. But what do they mean in common language? Dialects refers to dialogue as we often talk about dialogue. So, and it was not something new. You have already Socrates, then why Socrates was, we know that history, how Socrates was then went from street to street and he would encourage questions and there will be a dialogue, there is an open-ended. Mikhail Bakhtin talks about that in his theories. So it is a dialogue. So there is an interaction. That is what dialects means. So two entities are involved in dialectics. Now, what what Hegel had done was he would say consciousness precedes the existence, or consciousness precedes the material reality. But here we have Karl Marx inverting it. He says he gives primary centrality. He makes material as the cardinal principle of his theoretical framework. That first of all comes material. It is the material. So out there is objective reality, and we receive it with our sense organs, and it goes into our brain, and then whatever we make of that in our brain with the help of our mind. But the materiality precedes the things out there which are tangible, that we can touch, we can smell, we can feel, that precedes, and that is to be made critical in order to understand history, in order to understand world, in order to understand the place of a human being in the world. And then that he links with the larger. So you have dialectical materialism is mostly abstract theorization. That is the bottom of dialectic. But historical materialism is where he puts he uses this dialogic tendency to understand history. So Hegel understood it one way, that throughout history we find there is we have this classical cliched almost thesis and antithesis, and then we have synthesis, and then synthesis becomes another thesis, and it creates another contradiction. There is a antithesis again, and one more synthesis is created, and that is how human history, it progresses. So there is an unfolding consciousness as we move from one synthesis to another synthesis, because each new synthesis creates its own antithesis. That is how human beings and eventually we will reach that self consciousness. But it was abstract, and Marx believed that I have put Hegelian dialectics was standing on its head, and I have put it on its feet. So he had put consciousness first and materiality second. Now he puts materiality first and consciousness second, because even those thoughts cannot come to our mind unless we have some sensual apprehensions first. If they don't proceed, how can then we have this consciousness? So so in a way you can say Marx was in a kind of a dialogic conversation with Hegel, this famous Hegelian dialectic. So, but remember, when I am talking about synthesis, so synthesis is not an absolute truth. It is a partial, and the search for truth continues through these continuing contradictions between synthesis and antithesis. It continues. So we get only partial truth, then we move to another partial truth. So that way, perhaps we may ultimately reach. But what is this synthesis? So you have synthesis, antithesis. We feel as if these are very fine, catchy words, and perhaps we presume we believe we have understood. But so synthesis in a way is there are disparate several ideas around in society. So out of them, the predominant and that predominant one has an antithesis, the different one, and then there is a synthesis of the two, something new comes out of it, new one, and that is predominant in the next stage. That gets its own opponent, then it progresses forward in space, space and time. So, so what is crucial in this historical materialism? I think now this is something new. When I was saying that there was Marxism before Marx, they also proposed, similar idea. They also foregrounded that there is a conflict around there between classes, etc. But something new, mode of production was something strikingly new that Karl Marx proposed. He had read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and what he talked about. They also talked about labor theory and values. But now he is giving it a new turn. So he talks about mode of production. Now, what's mode of production is forces of production plus relations of production, or and then what is force of production? Tools plus labor. Now, very simply, for example, if I have a pen and I am creating this pen. Now, the tool what needs to be converted into pen, that is your tools, and then your labor, the energy that you spend on that is your forces of production. But while creating pen, you enter into different kinds of relations. So there are these human relationships at the same time. You combine these two, you have the mode of production. Now, Karl Marx would say that at different stages of human history, you had different types of modes of production, different types of these two things: forces of production and relations of production. And what happens along this human history is that technology intervenes and technology transforms these tools of production. With the result, new relations of production are created. Now, if I may read this code that I have put there, so that you can get a little bit more information about it and may be able to comprehend it even deeper. So what he says is, in the social production of their life, men enter into definite relations that are indispensable and independent of their will. Relations of production which correspond to a definite stage of development of their material productive forces. The sum total of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation on which rises the legal and political superstructure, and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. The mode of production of material life conditions the social, political, and intellectual life process in general. Now, first of all, I want to draw your attention to the way he writes. Although the translation from German, but you require a very hard mental discipline to even read his writings. But once you get a handle of that, you find there is a logical stream that flows out of there. So he would argue that at different stages of human history, the mode of production was of different types, and tools change. Technology is the major intervention that comes here. That technology intervenes, and then you have new tools. Maybe time is less spent on doing something, and that also then brings about corresponding changes in the relations of production. That brings about difference. So this was a novel concept that Karl Marx proposed, as far as my information and my reading of Karl Marx goes. An important idea that Karl Marx proposes here is the base superstructure. So you have the production of ideas interwoven with material activity, material relations, the real language of life. And he would say that what you put at the top, so again, we have this dual structure, this obsession, or you can say this involvement with duality runs throughout Western thought. You have man versus nature, God, Satan, etc. You know that, what I mean to say. So here also he makes us understand his base structure, superstructure model of society with the help of economic-based ideological superstructure. That at bottom you have this mode of production. And what mode of production, as I just said, is you have forces of production and the relations of production. And forces of productions further divided into tools and labor. And that whoever controls this mode of production then controls the superstructure also. The education, politics, media, religion, culture, he would bring about all these things into his. And that everything on top is actually it is a kind of a false consciousness that has been created among human beings. But they will not understand that this is false consciousness. They will not understand that all of this is a world that has been created unless they understand what he proposes as scientific materialism, what he proposes as historical materialism. Unless you get to know historical materialism as a concept, you will not believe in what I say, Karl Marx is saying. You will not believe. So whatever is on top, whether it is in our case, let us say universities, education system, you have media, even religion, which in that, politics, civil society, etc. All of that, what they think and what they do is at bottom because of this particular mode of production at that stage of history. So there is a conditioning. He would say ideas are as emanations of material state. They emanate from a particular material state. So continuously, as I said in the beginning, we go back to this materiality of his concepts, that don't ignore the material, the matter. So later on, many people have then criticized and they have shown us many big loopholes and flaws. We'll talk about that also later. So what are these different stages of history that he talked about? That so he would say that there was a primitive communism at one point of time in human history. Primitive communism, a tribal kind of a society which was classless. There was no private property. There was no exploitation. There was no oppressor and oppressed. All people seemed to be they were equal. So it's a kind of a nostalgia for that golden past. Although he doesn't want us to go to the exact same condition, but his progressive stages, the stages that he shows, and ultimately where we want to end, resembles that primitive state, the primitive communism, where there was no hierarchy between people, where one group did not exploit another person. So these are very exploitation, oppression. These are very catchy things. That is why people seem to be attracted towards these ideas. Then he says came the next stage in which we had again, for the first time, we had this slavery, slaves and masters. So you have in Greece, there were these masters, or in Rome, and then there were slaves who were doing all the time, and then masters had the leisure to reflect in Rome or in Athens. They would create ideas. In fact, if you read Aristotle, what he says, so slaves, in fact, women also, he put women closer in category to the slaves. So it is slaves then who provided that leisure for people like Aristotle and other people to reflect on situations, to reflect on life, and provide us ideas, which later on became bedrock, one of the bedrocks of the Western civilization. So that was another stage there was a transition. Now, remember that this transition is related to the mode of production that he was talking about. Because when mode of production changes, then there is a change in society also. There is a new thing that emerges, new groups. Then comes feudalism. We have landowners and serfs, the peasants who worked, and there were these big landlords out there. So one group uh, dominated over the other group. All of this started because when in primitive communism, one person said, "This is mine and that is yours," private property as an idea grew up. And then from that, it was like the Adam's fall from the Garden of Eden, stating that this is mine, and that is when you sketch a boundary on some piece of land, and what is within is yours, what is outside is somebody else's. In fact, some reflective or reminding us what Karl Marx is saying. There are people who are saying that somebody is on planet Mars, on planet Mars, and then he goes there and he says, "This plot is mine." So already we are not yet there, but that is how it may also be there if we can deduce certain things as deduced from Karl Marx, how it may happen even there, because right now no person there, and if Elon Musk succeeds, then what he is talking about, he talks about terraforming, that you heat up the planet and then anyway. So you have then the next stage, he says, is capitalism, the stage of which he was himself partly witness when he was growing up in Trier, and he witnessed in London and Bonn and Berlin and Paris and Belgium. He saw this new phenomenon now arising, that of capitalism. You have bourgeoisie, the ruling class now, and the proletariat, the working class. These are the terms. So factories are now growing up. Mode of production has changed. Now there is new technology that has emerged because of industrial revolution. So mode of production has changed, and we have a new dual structure, class structure, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Then we feel that time will come when socialism as state manages things, there will be workers, which is a transition stage before the final communism comes into picture. By the way, you should also understand the difference between socialism and communism, because communism is the final stage in the Marxist scheme, which resembles the early primitive tribal society, that there were no classes, no exploitation, no oppression, and of course no alienation, another concept that we will talk about soon. So we have communism, which there are no classes, the final stage, but there will be a stage before that, the transition stage of socialism state. There will be a hierarchy at that point, but that hierarchy is only temporary. It will also go away, and finally we will have that communism, the final stage. So these are the stages of history that Karl Marx delineates in his theoretical framework, in his concept of historical materialism. So he studies history from the point of view of material, the mode of production. He does not study as other people had studied from different angles. So some people study it from the Hegel studied it from dialectical thesis, antithesis ideas. He studied it from that point. Just a second. So he studied it from that point of view, the Hegelian. Can we take a break of 10 minutes and then we will come back?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Should we resume?
Yeah, sure. We can.
Okay, so I think let us resume now. All right, so am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. The
Okay.
screen is also visible clearly.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So, so I was talking about this slide that is in front of you, stages of history, and how Karl Marx saw history evolving. So he saw himself as a social, evolutionist, a social thinker, social scientist, and that is why the argument is that he can be placed in line with Darwin also, because Darwin provided that biological evolutionary theory. And what is exemplary of these stages of history is class conflict. There is a class struggle. So throughout history, he would see that whether it is slavery stage or feudalism stage or capitalism stage, that there is a struggle. There is always a tension, a conflict. Whether that conflict then emerges into a full-blown violence between these two rival groups or not, that is secondary. But he does witness that here are these different stages of history and provides very convincing evidence here. So he takes different examples from different places of the world to show how these stages. At one point, he did saw a gap, and what he did, he left a blank page just to show that my mind is not here filling the gap convincingly, and he had to erase a long chunk of his writing in order to first of all convince himself, and then he could convince his readers with regard to the logical evolution of human history. Then we move on to why he did this. There is always, so if we are talking about social context theory, that this theory has a context, what was his immediate context to talk about these things? After all, if he believes that human consciousness is a product of human society or societal circumstances, then his own thought was a product of the societal circumstances. So, what were those circumstances that prompted him to reflect on that? First of all, in the temperament of that time, if you use the German word Zeitgeist, the spirit of the time age at that time was people thinking about socialism. As I said, that there were people previously who had thought on similar lines, although not use the same language, not use the same structure of their in their frameworks, but but there were these sparks in the air at that time. And the immediate context for his thought was this industrial revolution that swept across many countries of Europe, especially Western Europe, and Germany being in Western Europe, where industrial revolution created ripples. So massive industries. um, so you have trains, or you have factories emerged on the scene. Mining, the landscape of mining changed. Coal was a common product being used because of the cold climate in Europe. So there were rapid advances in the way coal began to be used in factories. So earlier they were transported in one way, now railway lines were being laid. So rapid changes began to take place because of this industrial revolution. But with those rapid changes also, he could see that a new mode of production is emerging. New tools have now come into the hand of man. New technology has come into the in human hands. So that have changed the landscape of the mode of production. Capitalism. So he used the word capital and capitalism. In fact, capitalism word comes from caputa, which means head, and this word has similar origins as that of chattel or cattle, so owning something. So there were these radical claims on ownership on the produce from this industrial revolution. And there was a sharp contrast now. As students of English literature, we know in 19th century literature provides us ample examples of that. Whether you have Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy, a very famous document from 19th century. He was a poet as well as a cultural critic, wherein I remember what he says, we are worshipping size and numbers. So a new religion seems to have replaced the essential values of Christianity. Now people are looking at numbers, people are looking at size. Numbers here referring to how much do I have, how much is in my pocket, how much money I owe, or how much land do I have, how these big estates that are available. And he talks about that the situation is ripe for anarchy. Only thing is that the English people by temperament, they don't believe in revolution. They believe that freedom and progress, it moves from step by step. It moves step by step. In England, we don't have the taste for revolution. But then things were dramatically changed. We have the poem Chimney Sweeper, and you know we have even Dover Beach has some instances. We can link it to the Marxist way of looking at life, or very famously Charles Dickens. His novels, whether it is Great Expectations or you have Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist's famous sentence that I have also put on the slide here. Please, sir, I want some more. When he goes to the shopkeeper, he is hungry and he's almost starved. He doesn't have money. And this sentence then even went to the British Parliament, where it was discussed, where it was revealed that look what we are doing in the upper corridors of power and what is actually happening on ground. Our people are suffering because of these changes, where few people are accumulating capital and a vast majority is deprived of the benefits of this industrial revolution. Then we have his Hard Times, a character called Thomas Gradgrind, who is this school board superintendent who is only worried about profit, and he wants more and more profit. He's portrayed as a very brutal character in that novel Hard Times. Or George Eliot. If you see George Eliot's Middlemarch, which Virginia Woolf said that this is one of the rare novels for grown-up people. Her reasons were different because she was looking at it from a female perspective, in that this is one of those rare novels from 19th century which depicts life post marriage, in case of characters like Dorothea or Celia or Mary, or you have Rosamond. So she called it one of the few rare novels for mature, for grown up people, also because of the serious tone of that epic novel. But that also depicted this fallout of the Industrial Revolution. We have, and most people in that, and Middlemarch, by the way, is a fictional representation of the Midlands town. It is in the backwaters of England, and people have large estates. So you have uncle of these two sisters, Dorothea and Celia, who have a large estate, and on his estate are these tenants who live in cottages. But the condition of these cottages is so bad that his niece Dorothea, she wants to improve the condition of these cottage farmers. They are working as tenants in his land. So large estate. Then there is one scene where Caleb Garth, who is father of Mary, he wants to lay a railway line. So showing that industrial revolution and railway line, and people protest against it because they feel that they will be deprived of the labor that they are utilizing to feed themselves and their families. So there is a big opposition to that as well. So Middlemarch is also one of the novels which show us how this change was engulfing both the cities as well as these backwaters, the provincial areas of England, and people were flooding cities in search of new opportunities, and population was also growing because of that, pollution taking place. So that was an immediate prompt for Karl Marx, although he was not living in England but in Germany. So the distance is not so far. He read about it, and books could travel, and journalists could travel from India, from England to India at that time for colonial rulers in India. It was not difficult for Karl Marx to read and to hear what was happening in England, and in fact in Germany itself was also changing because of this. So from literature you can take so many examples where you find that things were not in good shape, and Karl Marx could read it, and he could feel that a new stage has come in the human history. And here we have now the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the working class working in these factories, who don't have much available to them in terms of the money, or to use his language, capital. It was all increasing for the industrialists, the private property. So it was growing. Now another thing here is, and you see, now there was a new way of trying to make capitalists, to make them feel satiated, or their satiety. How can it be now improved? There were new ways. So earlier, uh, technology did not provide them avenues of accumulation. So if you had 10 acres of land, you can have 15 acres of land. But then how much land would you have? Because you cannot have, you can only have that much land which you can also maintain, that you can visit, you can see every day, or after a week, or a month, but you cannot go beyond that. But now when the banking system came, which now currency, so your numbers are, it is not in with you, so it is now growing. Or you could earlier have just one car, or maybe two cars, or three cars. Now there were new ways of accumulation. So there was this abundance. There is a abundance, but abundance only for a few. So that was an immediate prompt for Karl Marx to think. He was already in his initial life uh, related to what were called as young Hegelians, or some socialist groups. So he had this in his mind, this and he came from a Jewish background, and he knew what happens if you belong to any kind of minority, whether it is uh, ethnic or it is financial minority, if you are marginalized in terms of finance. In fact, he wrote an essay called On the Jewish Question, and he thought about it because this Jewish question is looming large over Western literature or Western thought, and he felt that whatever problems there are because of civil society, and civil society provides ideas that then percolate down to the masses, and then the anti-Semitic feelings come among the masses. So he put the blame on the civil society, and later on, believing that the civil society itself is a product of the ideology of the capitalist system, and ideology itself belonging to this realm of the superstructure. So that was broadly the context from which emerged the historical materialist thought of Karl Marx. He could vividly see in front of him what is happening, how the cultural and economic landscape is changing, how a new economic ecosystem is being created, in which some are extremely marginalized, and they are getting more marginalized, while on the other hand people are accumulating their numbers. Their capital is vastly increasing because of what they are getting from this industrial revolution. Now, an important concept that Karl Marx gave at this stage is the concept of alienation, which in German is called Entfremdung. So he gets it from there. Now, alienation was earlier also as an idea there in case of, let us say, Hegel. Hegel had already talked about this idea of alienation, but in a different context. What Hegel would say is that there was, first of all, an absolute spirit. And this absolute spirit was totality. There was no subject and object. They were united. They were fused together. And then came a stage when there was a separation of the subject and the object. The subject got alienated from the object. And eventually, there may come a stage where again the subject and object will be reunited. They will segue into each other, and then we will have again a totality, an absolute spirit. But remember, he was not talking in religious sense. In religious sense, although he had a bit of religious influence, and perhaps that religious influence, that of biblical influence of the statement in the beginning was the word. It was already there, and then happened this, or maybe the Garden of Eden as a totality where there was no segregation, etc. But he does not look at it entirely. He called absolute separate, and then there was a segregation, separation, and subject was alienated from object. But Karl Marx gives it a new term, that what modern work, this capitalist work does, it alienates. Means it separates. There is an emotional disconnect now. We have specialized economies, and they create even more alienation. What does it mean? Let me illustrate it with the help of a mobile phone. So if I have a mobile phone, I am a laborer. This mobile phone, I do not get what genuine sense of contribution. I do not. My wishes do not seem to be expressed in the object that I have created, because I do not see myself in the object that I have created, because it goes to someone else. These are mass produced. I simply become a hand. I simply become a labor that uses time and energy to produce this. So there are multiple levels. In fact, so Karl Marx would say the alienation of man thus appeared as the fundamental evil of capitalist society. This alienation is very central. And then we have multiple levels of alienation. Let me say, for example, you are not interested in this lecture at this time. You may feel alienated. What is happening here? You are not emotionally connected to what is being done. So he would argue that the laborer, first of all, he is alienated from the product of his labor. Then from the process, when he spends half an hour in that, or he spends 2 hours, or he spends a week, sometimes a month in creating something, because this product is commodified. There is a fetishism about it, that things like the wishes of the laborer, they are stripped away from the product, with the result only the product floats in the space of market, and the fetishism created about it. Then he is also alienated from others, from other human beings, because now the relationship between him and the others is that of interest. These are interest based relationships. How much money is available, how much money accrues from what he has produced. So everyone seems to be in competition with another person, which is another feature of this thought of this capitalist stage, because competition is the key. You compete. So time is money. That if you are successful, so we enter into a new economic Darwinian world, where you survive if you can compete. If you don't compete, you sink. So then he's also alienated from himself, his own self. He doesn't feel, it creates a kind of a Freudian split in his own self. A good example of this can be if you have read Sons and Lovers, where you have this Walter Morrell, who is father of Paul, how he works in a coal mine. And he goes, in fact, there is a famous sentence, although it is said in a very vernacular form, that I went down when I was 7 or 8 years old. What he means there is that I was just 7 years old when I went down into a coal mine. And since then, it is very rarely that I have seen the daylight, because I go down early in the morning into coal mine and I come out late at night. And with the result of what happens to that family, you can do a Marxist reading of that. The family breaks down because of various reasons. He cannot feed that family, and he is not so connected physically also with family members. Although there is a class struggle there because his wife belongs to a different class and the marriage takes place between them, class conflict. But he feels alienated from his family, he feels alienated from his co-workers, he then ultimately feels alienated from his own self. You lose belief in what you are as a human being. And Karl Marx, when he talks about the labor theory, labor was also critical to him, that all human endeavor, it starts with labor. When you do something, then something happens. So the act of doing, the labor act, whatever the nature of that doing, it starts with that. So he wanted an unalienated subject, that a subject who enjoys the work that he does, who enjoys leisure, who has freedom to do at his own time, at his own risk, at his own place. Unlike the modern economy where you are forced to do something because there is a chain that takes place. In fact, here I want to bring to your attention, there is a book, although it is not Marxism, but it's also worth reading. Uh, Jawaharlal Nehru's Glimpses of World History, which are a collection of his letters to his daughter Indira. Several letters, very long letters, where he actually, eulogizes this socialist mechanism and what are the benefits of it. So later on, we find that when he becomes the prime minister, five-year plan was actually from the Soviets, USSR, because they had initiated that, and that was also then replicated here. But he, he is he is so effusive in praise about this system, where human beings seem to have regained that dignity of labor in a new economy that is, as per him, flourishing at that time. Just a second.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for this. We are also in the academia, in universities, also entering into a labor market of its own, where teachers,
No problem at all.
in addition to teaching, have to do a lot of administrative work, and we have our own kind of alienation in the system. So anyway, uh,
More alienated.
so we have this human being alienated from at different levels. So we have alienated from the product of labor, process of labor, and then others, and also from ultimately his own self. That is why he called it the fundamental evil of capitalist society. But alienation as a concept was not novel. He only modified and adapted it to his own historical materialism concept. And we move on, we have very important labor, the idea of value, which is related to his idea of this alienation. Because now, when for example, if I am making a mobile phone, there are three kinds of values that we can talk about. One is the value that, when you are working on the mobile phone, the sense of satisfaction that you get after creating this product. You are doing it for your own sake. So in the earlier time, maybe people crafted certain, some handicrafts were made. Artisans did something. So there was, that is the use value, as Karl Marx, the sense of relief and the sense of deep fulfillment that you attain after creating a product. Then you have the exchange value. The exchange value is when you are actually selling it. So you get the benefit of it. You get a some money from the product that you have created. But what is more important is the surplus value, which comes into picture in a capitalist society. So surplus value is the value that the capitalist gets. So let us say the pen or the mobile phone I sell for 100 rupees, but when the capitalist is providing you the tools of production of this mobile phone, then you have he gets an extra money for this from the market. He sells it somewhere else. That surplus value of that surplus money goes to the capitalist's pocket. It does not remain there. So this then increases. So when that capitalist gets into competition with someone else, and he wants to increase his profit, he wants to enhance his monetary benefits, he enforces more strict regulations on that person who's actually making that product. With the result, the living conditions, the workplace conditions, they get harsher because somebody at the top is in competition with someone else. So he has a rival, he has to compete with that. So in this game of capitalistic one-upmanship, the person who is crushed, who is at the bottom, the man who is making it. So his use value decreases while as the surplus value goes up. So that is why Karl Marx says capital has one single life impulse, the tendency to create value and surplus value, to make it a constant factor, the means of production, absorb the greatest possible amount of surplus labor. Capital is dead labor that vampire-like only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. So that is how alienation also increases, because while you are trying to increase your profit, while you are trying to increase your gain, that happens at the expense of the person who is actually making it, the human being. So if you are now producing in bulk, you are producing 10,000 mobile phones or 20,000 mobile phones. The person who is making it, he almost becomes invisible. Although there are machines now available, but so machine is available to make them, but the person who is there behind, he simply disappears from picture, although his time is taken for this to run those machines. So that is how he talks about value, that in a capitalist society the use value goes down so much that the person who makes it only remains a hand. He becomes an object. That sentiment or that feeling element, that sense of satisfaction or leisure or freedom, they all disappear because there is a cutthroat competition with which the capitalist has to keep pace, and with the result, the person who is there at the bottom, he suffers the most. Then we come to literary evidences about this concept of alienation. And in this, we have several examples. For example, we have Albert Camus, we have Franz Kafka, and then we have Robert Musil, and we have also here Sons and Lovers. We have already talked about that. A portrait of many examples can come to mind. These ones that I have written, I have gone through them while as a student or also while teaching in classroom. These are perfect examples. So Franz Kafka, this idea of alienation. In fact, most modernist fiction, whether you take Virginia Woolf or you have Ulysses, in fact, about Ulysses, there is a famous sentence that came from the USSR, because it came around the same time. The Bolshevik Revolution in USSR happened in 1917. when there was a competition of ideas between the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. Then later on, the Bolsheviks, one of the Bolshevik uh, thinkers, he said that Ulysses is a heap of cow dung crawling with worms. So much distaste and dislike he showed for the text, because they would say there is nothing that is giving us a tangible sense of reality outside. Same in Sons and Lovers, which I talked about. Then you have Camus, again, this alienation of solitary human beings. In a portrait of the artist as a young man, we have Stephen Dedalus, the central character. And what do we find him as at the end of the novel? At the end of the novel, he looks like a lost soul, and he wants to leave Ireland, solitary, and as if the reality around him that is blank. There is nothing that uh, there is this dialectics between objective reality and the subject that seems to be missing. And again, for example, you have uh, George Lukács, the famous Marxist. He has written an essay, Ideology of Modernism, in which he even criticized the technique of stream of consciousness. That stream of consciousness and these human beings who are shown as alone, lonely, depressed, in various forms of psychological problems, anxiety. These are reflections of the ideology around the capitalist ideology. So the capitalist uh, sphere, the capitalist space outside is actually being mimicked by the modernist fiction. It is not isolated. It's not just a matter of form, an innovation or experimentation. This is a logical conclusion. This is a logical extension of the system outside. So here, George Lukács also brings Martin Heidegger, who had said that human existence is like a thrownness. It is like a thrownness into being, as if we are thrown. Although Martin Heidegger was looking at the solitariness, the loneliness of human beings in fiction or outside from a different perspective, philosophical one. But modernist fiction, if you look at this essay, George Lukács, he would argue that this modernist fiction showing character, or even the last scene of Sons and Lovers, where you have Paul, he is looking far away into the landscape, and he only sees some dim lights, and he wants to leave, and he is a he is a psychological wreck at the end of the novel. So Lukács would argue that this is not coincidental, this is not accidental. There is it emerges from a particular kind of economy outside, a capitalist economy. That is because all this is happening. And primitive accumulation. For what happens now in capitalist economy, just like in earlier times, they would have more land. Now the land is being replaced maybe by notes, numbers, how much you want to have. So the old instinct is revisiting human economic scene in this capitalist society. So profit is seen as theft, wages are shrinking, and Karl Marx, in fact, believed that instability is endemic to capitalism, and there is a crisis of abundance, not shortage. There is too much, actually. There is, even today, if you look at, let me give an example of Elon Musk, because I follow him on Twitter and I see what, he has great ideas also. Later on, we will see in criticism, although not much time is left, but I will try to, also bring in that. Elon Musk, if you look at his wealth, we know it, all of us know how billionaires are springing up. And on the other hand, we have these 19th century like slums around, and they are also growing, population is also growing. So David Harvey, Marxist critic, in fact, it is worth watching David Harvey's series on Das Kapital, and he has enunciated with great clarity, clarity in the sense of the clarity that you generally get in theoretical realms. At least he has tried to bring it to the level of common people. The text, Das Kapital. He says, and I quote, primitive accumulation as a process which principally entailed taking land, say, enclosing it and expelling a resident population to create a landless proletariat, and then releasing the land into the privatized mainstream of capital accumulation. So we have this primitive accumulation now getting replicated in the capitalist society in the form of capital accumulation. And profit is seen simply as theft. Theft from whom? Theft from the person or persons who are involved in actually producing those products. So the surplus value that is taken away by the capitalists, that allows for this primitive kind of capitalism. But capitalism, Karl Marx would say, is not only bad for workers, it is also bad for everyone, because what is at the center of capitalism is self-interest, material self-interest. He had given the example of bourgeoisie marriage, that marriage where the idea of inheritance, you are passing on wealth from one generation to another generation and you accumulate wealth. The bourgeoisie has torn from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. Commodity fetishism, commodity capitalism, competition. So this is a natural logical extension. So capitalism, then you have competition, and ultimately you have monopoly emerging from that. Few people monopolizing the resources, few people monopolizing the products that are out there in the market. So it is bad for everyone. Marriages where profit, so you make strategic alliances through marriages only because you want to hoard more capital, you want to accumulate more capital. Then we have ultimately what Karl Marx would say, that the aim, the goal is communism. And what are the steps? The proletariat have to unite, they have to seize government, and there will be a reversal of positions, in the sense that proletariat are now on top and the ruling bourgeoisie are at bottom. So this is a transition stage before going into classlessness. But is this a utopia that he thought of? Only he was creating a utopia. Maybe yes, or maybe no, because we have example like Thomas More and Owen Fourier. I mentioned them before, also Proudhon, and Plato had also talked about the ideal state, what we are going to do that. So is he only providing us an insight uh, into the primeval urge of human being for something noble? It is like Jesus's idea of the promised land, or different faiths have their own ideas about golden age, what is going to happen. So, and many people, many critics would argue that USSR was an experiment in this direction. But what happened to USSR ultimately? This experiment did not work. It actually failed. Although, if you look at Marxist critics, they give their own reasons as to why that happened. Ejaz Ahmed would say that USSR was encircled from all sides, and that was the reason for the demise or the collapse of this state. That was the reason, and not any other factor. But an expression of that old urge for something golden, for something noble, where people have leisure, people have. So Karl Marx's theory is also seen as a theory of freedom, because ultimately it liberates people from that monotony of capitalism, the routine of capitalism, and it provides a space for leisure and for relief. He would also, Marxist critics, when argue that what feminists say, or female women have come out, they would say it from a different angle, that it is now growing competition that has drawn the capital. Money is to be accumulated. That is why everyone is to be drawn out into the economy, so that this competition can be met, its goals can be met. We have another, contemporary, we have new leftists around now. For example, Marcuse, we have C. Wright Mills. C. Wright Mills popularized this new left ideology. We have many people around them. There is one popular, I forgot his name. He's a Marxist currently living in England. Uh, he has written some famous books on the new left. Now, what they are now mixing up, giving up the classical orthodox Marxist thought, and um, especially Communist Party of USA and Communist Party of Britain after World War II, especially after Hungarian Revolution 1956. A new thought emerged that we need to perhaps change the means of attaining the goal for using parliamentary democracy and collaborating with different movements around the world. So you will find now Marxists in favor of environmentalism, in favor of protecting climate against climate change, or maybe sometimes talking about antibiotics, which are next after climate change. That is a great danger to humanity. We need to put a check on that. So the earlier there was this disillusionment that crept in after Hungarian Revolution and then Soviet Union, what has happened, and Stalin, the atrocities committed during USSR, or the great cultural leap of Mao Zedong, what happened, how many people. So they created a bad name for the classical Marxist thought in which revolution had to be brought and blood will spill, and they began to change, direction, not direction, but maybe the ways of choosing that direction. We went against that. Then we have, where do we, how, where we find the usage of this Marxist thought or literary application. We have already, what is I wandered lonely as a cloud. An example. In fact, the whole romantic movement, their escape from the urban scenes, escape imaginatively, that this is not what we want, going towards the nature. Maybe they are going towards the nature is a sign of trying to recapture their original self, or trying to find their totality in the Hegelian sense, the absolute self, where the subject and the object are united. The industrial scene has created this gap between nature and their self. The nature seems to be polluted, the nature seems to be degraded now because of the human system, the capitalist system. So we need to go away from it. So indicative of the new economy, the laissez-faire economy, free market, that is leading to these things. So we also sometimes as lay human beings feel that something is wrong, that this development model that we are witnessing, how much resources are we going to exploit? Is there an endless source of resources that we can use until in time, and at what cost it is going to be done? What will happen to human beings as population is increasing, and we are finding in the name of development how profits are made at the cost of human lives, pharmaceutical companies, the medicines that are being made. There is a book on the pharmaceutical company in India. There is a very famous book, I forgot, where it is published, it is written by two people, where go, they they have done research, and ultimately bottle of lies, I think it is called a bottle of lies, in which basically they are saying the medicines that are being consumed, their contamination, adulteration in them, in the pursuit of profit, whatever will happen to the patient. So we have several examples like this, and sometimes we have this gut feeling that perhaps things are not going in the right direction. We want countries to develop, but development at what cost? And what is real development? Is it accumulation of capital, and who are benefiting from this? Is it only a handful of people at the top who change policies, who influence policy making decisions? There are people who even oppose the very idea of climate change, that it is not happening, it is just an illusion. So I wandered lonely as a cloud, example from Wordsworth, where you find these gaps emerging at a particular stage, or even in Keats or the autumn work, Shelley was more vocal when he talked about it in his famous song to the men of England, what you need to do to break your chains. So that is more in your face kind of poem that allows itself to be read from a Marxist perspective. King Lear, where King Lear uh, may be a sign of the decline of the feudal class, rise of the new class. King Lear, in his last scene, the storm, when he almost seems to be like going mad. And, or even Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's comedies have been subject to this kind of analysis, where eventually what happens is the old class structure is restored, and you have characters like Olivia or Sino Malvolio. They eventually they go back to their own, own little silos, the class silos where they receive that comfort. So restoration of the class structure of society. So finally, what are the basic premises of Marxism? So we have dialectical materialism that I mentioned, historical materialism or stages of history, labor theory, in which I talked about the value of what he means by value. Although, you see, I'm not an expert having books on Marxism. No doubt I have some essays, some research papers on Marxism. But then they require the hardest mental discipline to understand them in more depth. What he means by labor theory, what were the intellectual antecedents of this labor theory, Adam Smith, Ricardo, for example, what they had said and how he modified them. So if you are more interested, then you need to read all those master texts also. Then we have class struggle here, and class struggle is also, he witnesses that class struggle is endemic now in current society. At the time he wrote Das Kapital or Communist Manifesto, these were more vivid. The classes are emerging, rich are getting richer, and he proposes a socialist society ultimately ending in communism. Then we have classlessness at the end, which is almost a mirror image of the primitive communism, the tribal society in which there were no classes or there was no exploitation. Just one or two. Then the critique of Marxism, that is also on a large scale. Francis Fukuyama wrote End of History, in which he basically said that after World War I, capitalism has won. This is final. This is the end of this thought of Karl Marx that things are going to change, revolution is going to happen. That is not going to happen. This is the end now after World War I. And then we witnessed also fall of Soviet Union, that reinforced what perhaps he was saying. But hardcore Marxist thinkers, they will believe no, Marxism is an organic theory. It is a theory that can be adapted to different situations at different times. So we don't need to worry about it. And Marx was not, his texts are not scriptures that cannot be modified or changed or reinterpreted in different ways, as has happened at several stages after Marx's death. You have Frankfurt School, or you have then Althusser. Althusser is a very good example, where Althusser proposed several new. For example, he talked about relative autonomy, or he talked about overdeterminism, that it is not simply base and superstructure. So there are other factors also that determine the construction of this superstructure. Or his concept of relative autonomy, that art is relatively autonomous. It is not, art is entirely a product of the mode of production in the base of this model of base superstructure. It does have some kind of autonomy. Then you can even, in USA, there is a very fierce critique of Marxism being made. There was a lot of witch hunting of Marxists, especially during Cold War. Then Sprague, if you are interested to watch his videos, and Jordan Peterson, a very popular contemporary writer, his famous books 12 Rules for Life, he is very viscerally attacking Marxism. And I can go on and on what these people say about Marxism, believing, affirming that Marxism believes that human nature is essentially good, while as we don't believe it is essentially good. That is why they are proposing certain things with regard to Marxism in future. So, in fact, Jordan Peterson would claim that postmodernism is nothing but a modification of Marxism. They want these splinter groups, identity politics, which does not want any, which denies sovereignty of the individual, which basically, according to him, goes against the very essential principles of Western thought, which are rooted in Bible. So anyway, but the thing remains that until capitalism is there, until there is exploitation, Marxism will remain relevant, because what fundamentally, essentially, Karl Marx was doing, he was talking about liberating the human being and giving due dignity to his labor, and the end of oppression in different forms, especially economic oppression, and giving a new shape to human society in future also. So with that, I thank you all for being patient listeners. I think we are also done. We are very close, just 5 minutes are left. If anybody wants to have a quick comment or anything else, I will be happy to listen to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Javed, for such a detailed and scholastic and in-depth analysis of the entire trajectory of Marxism. We have a few questions here. First question is by Himakshi Kashyap. She asks, is Marxism still relevant, or have we entered into a neo-Marxist or post-Marxist era? What is your comment? But I think you have already said that in your
Yeah, I think we have talked about that.
Yes.
I think I don't know when
In addition to what Himakshi asked, I have a very slight query. I mean, do you think that this idea of classlessness is even remotely possible ever? I mean, or it is just a utopian vision, deferred till the indefinite future?
my own personal belief is that hierarchy is,
Yeah.
hierarchy is everywhere. Now,
Yeah.
but there has to be a difference between hierarchy of competence and the hierarchy of tyranny. People often talk about patriarchy, but uh, we looked at it from the perspective of hierarchy. It is different. But when you look at it from the tyranny of the patriarchy, the oppression of patriarchy, that way it will look different. But I think, wherever you see, uh, the thing is, what Marxism is doing, that there is the different evils that are prevalent in the West is because of capitalism. But the evils have deeper roots. If you look at, there are evolutionary scientists who are working on, who have given their own insights as to what has happened before even capitalism emerged. The human history does not just start in 19th century or the tribal society. Even before that, how we have, from a Darwinian perspective, how we have evolved, and what are certain characteristics or traits to human beings that are genetically inbuilt inside us.
Mm.
So that is why, when Jordan Peterson, he says that when I read Das Capital, after every page I feel he is saying nonsense. So that is just Jordan Peterson, because he takes into the psychological perspective, that psychological angle, or biological evolutionary angle, as to how, as to why human beings behave in a particular way. There is a different take that they have, or in fact they would say human being is the final reference point, not a collectivity. When you talk about collectivism, because socialism, Marxism is a collectivistic ideology, then what happens to individual? That individual is crushed under the weight of that collectivist politics. That is why they go against identity politics. Don't talk about these splinter groups, and then these splinter groups have subgroups. So all of that is turned down by these people. But ultimately, if you see Marxist as a thought that talks about human justice, it will remain relevant in maybe different forms. in different ways, because he meant, his own life when he went to London after moving the from the continent, what in Europe they call continental area. He went to London. His life was miserable, unless if there had been no Friedrich Engels. In fact, I'm sorry that I have not mentioned Friedrich Engels, who was very much right there whenever they were proposing this theory. He has also collaborated in Das Kapital also. So, but for him, he would have almost long before given up, because monetarily he was not in such a good condition. So, justice was very central, as a central human justice pillar of his thought. So, until human justice remains relevant, Karl Marxism will also remain relevant.
Yeah. One more question. One of our scholars has put a question that, first of all, she appreciates your illuminating presentation. Then, sir, I would like to ask if we can try to apply the Marxist notion of ideology, where it is mostly controlled by the ruling class, in the post-humanist approach as well.
Yes, ideology as a, just a second. You see, first of all, we need to know what ideology means in the Marxist framework. Ideology is this, is this scape of ideas that is an offshoot of the capitalist system. So ideology, first of all, we need to segregate that, how other people are understanding it, how Marxists are understanding it. So ideology, as per Marxists, would also be an instrument of oppression, whatever ideas are floating around. So if I understood her right, what she is saying, because there was a little intervention here, that ideology is definitely an instrument of oppression with the ruling class in a particular system. And as I said, Karl Marx, when he was proposing this theory, he had thought that uh, capitalism would internally collapse, especially in the Western European countries where industrialization was very widespread. He believed that this internal collapse, because it is there are contradictions in it, but that didn't happen. That hasn't happened. In fact, that happened somewhere else where he had least thought it would take place. So not all his assumptions, not all his presumptions proved to be correct. But then there is a large scale appeal of the thought. If, in the US, if you even look today, I would all invite you to listen to Dennis Prager. He is one of the uh, he's a very popular writer and belonging to the conservative wing. Although he is Jewish, but he is a very eloquent proponent of the sovereignty of the individual and liberalism, liberal thought. So he has a huge long list of complaints. In fact, he says that everything that Marxism touches, it becomes evil. So they have brought nothing but atrocities and oppression all over the place wherever they have gone. Although there have been revolutions, for example, Cuba, Vietnam, or China. Although Chinese variety of Marxism, Mao Zedong modified it, he incorporated elements from traditional historical Chinese thought into it. He talked in terms of contradictions. Uh, so anyway, that is what I had to say about it.
Any other participant, do you have any query so that we can quickly take up, because we are almost coming to a close of this session. I think everyone is totally engrossed by the talk, so they don't have any of further query, I suppose. So thank you very much, Dr. Javed, for accepting our invitation and being with us. Now I invite our HOD, Madam Nivedita Daspal, to offer the vote of thanks.
Good evening, all. At the outset, I would like to offer my gratitude to our invited speaker, Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt, for accepting our invitation and enlightening or rather, I should say, enriching us with his erudite and thought provoking lecture. We are fortunate to have had you, sir, on this online platform, touching upon the contemporary theories and areas in association with Marxism, while referring to a wide range of texts and writers from English literature and a plethora of relevant and connected issues. I'm sure the participants have benefited a lot from today's lecture program. I next offer my gratitude to Dr. Horod Borkotoki, Principal Nowgong College Autonomous, for his support and encouragement in organizing this lecture series. I thank Dr. Bhuvan Chutia for his overall support and help. I thank Dr. Sabrin Ahmed for conceptualizing this advanced lecture series and also for organizing the whole program. I thank the members of the PRC of Nowgong College for giving us this platform. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants whose active participation has made today's program a grand success. Thank you.
So thank you all.
Thank you very much to all of you.
So I will send this link to you later. Okay. Thank you.